The Pentagon's UFO reporting hotline is still nowhere to be found. After first being announced last year, some witnesses say they feel forced to turn to Capitol Hill or other groups to share stories of their alleged sightings, while others state it discourages them from even attempting to flag incidents at all, according to Politico.
Pilot Chris Van Voorhees, who claims to regularly see, quote, self-luminous orbs in the atmosphere, said, quote, there's an immense amount of data that could be collected out there from general aviation or commercial aviation pilots that are afraid to come forward at this point in time. He said he has not reported the incidents through an official channel because the methods to do so are obscure. He added that if he did report what he has seen, he believes it would, quote, fall on deaf ears. So that's really shocking. It's become very difficult for people who see things to find an official channel to report to. But coming from an aviation pilot who regularly sees strange things, for him to be so confident it would fall on deaf ears is also shocking, especially the way, I know, Amber, we're paying attention to this. We've seen whistleblowers be dismissed by the general public, by people who are journalists who should be reporting on what's being said in these congressional hearings. And also, not only that, we have people like Michael Schellenberger, who is investigating and corroborating what the witnesses that talked to David Grusch had said. And so what we have now is this situation where reporting from The Intercept is talking about David Grusch's medical records, talking about a psychiatric detention, where reportedly he said something along the lines of wanting to kill himself or be killed to his wife, something suicidal, which is not something that casts any kind of doubt on his testimony before Congress or what he knows from the military and intelligence community about UFOs. It seems like a really sad attempt to call this whistleblower crazy for talking about aliens.
Yeah, I think that's right. There seems to be this inability among so many journalists to balance healthy skepticism for some of the claims that are being made with not being so dismissive outright of what's being talked about. And these are claims that go back decades, right? These are not new claims. And David Grusch apparently did identify the firsthand sources that he spoke to Congress behind closed doors in a controlled skiff. So he did provide more information than was given in his testimony. And it does seem like interesting timing that just a few days afterward, we have this Intercept article come out. As you said, basically what it does is it uses police reports that were obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, which is legitimate journalism, of course, to basically paint him as crazy. They point to two different incidents that he had when he was struggling with alcoholism and suicidal thoughts. He apparently had PTSD after coming out of the military, and in a statement in response to this Intercept report, said that those days are behind him. Now, what's interesting is that there's been speculation about where this Intercept report actually came from, where Ken Klippenstein, the author of the piece, had the idea to look into police reports at the addresses where David Grusch lived. And one person is speculating that perhaps the tips came from the intelligence community itself. Let's watch that on News Nation.
I mean, my concerns and the concerns of David Grusch and his lawyers still hold. Frankly, it's quite clear that within 3 days of Mr. Grusch giving evidence to a hearing of the Congress, where he talked about the fact that he was expecting reprisals, that he knew new reprisals were ongoing, within 3 days, the journalist makes a request to the police. And look, there's no criticisms here of the journalist, as we made clear yesterday. This is what journos do. It's unpleasant sometimes, but you do. You get tips. And there's no doubt in my mind, knowing how this works, that the journalist was given a tip. Somebody told him where to look. And I've checked with Mr. Grusch. He actually lived at multiple addresses in Virginia, and it's very interesting that the FOI was directed at those particular addresses where those particular incidents occurred.
Fair enough, Jessica. There was an interview that Ken Klippenstein gave on Twitter, or X Spaces, whatever we're calling it now, where he did confirm that he was told by multiple people to look into David Grusch's background. He said, quote, intel people, they're vague. They'll be like, look into his background. And he said that was where he got the idea to start looking for publicly available information that he could FOIA request from David Grusch's various addresses. So, I mean, I'm definitely more interested in who in the intelligence community is so obsessed with trying to discredit discredit David Grusch than I am with the specific claims made in the article, because obviously we shouldn't hold it against people if they have mental health struggles.
For me, that is really where the real story is. Who in the intelligence community is so threatened by David Grusch's testimony that they think it's worthwhile to have reporters bring up his PTSD, his suicidal thoughts? To me, it makes sense that people who have served in the military are struggling with their mental health. They have to see and do a lot of very violent things that predispose them for these conditions. If we revoked everybody's security clearance who is struggling with PTSD and depression or suicidal thoughts, we would have an extreme shortage of officials to serve in the military and intelligence community. It's just absurd to report on this in a manner that would discredit David Grusch in any way. I don't think it's of public interest that David Grusch was ever suicidal or struggled with PTSD. It has nothing to do with what he's speaking about as a whistleblower. It has nothing to do with why he's in the public eye right now. And to me, it seems like this really kind of shady journalism that is not done to expose a necessary truth, but is done for clicks because David Grusch is in the news cycle right now, or worse, because military and intelligence officials would very much like you to, and they've promised a relationship to give you tips in the future in exchange for a hit piece on this guy that they really want to stop talking. It just doesn't feel like good and honest journalism to me. And I think anyone that's been following the issue of UAPs and UFOs would say the kind of journalism that Michael Schellenberger did in corroborating a lot of these stories with military and intelligence officials about the craft and potential pilots that we have is the kind of necessary investigative journalism we need on the topic, not slandering David Grusch's mental health.
And what's really interesting about The Intercept's involvement in this is that The Intercept really gained prominence by being an anti-national security state paper, which was really in opposition to places like the New York Times and the Washington Post, which were basically stenographers for the intelligence community. And now we see that The Intercept has basically fallen into that trap as well. It's one of the reasons why Glenn Greenwald left the paper a couple of years ago. Meanwhile, on the Texas front, scientists have appeared to discover the true identity of a tiny UFO creature. Texas nature trackers reportedly found it dangling. According to Cron, the species is a bagworm. Texas Parks and Wildlife spokesperson Laren Johnson said bagworms, which are made of silk and plant material and are created by a caterpillar as it grows, are common in Texas. After a photo of the creature was originally shared online, however, some are questioning whether it was a UFO. So again, there does need to be healthy skepticism of some of these claims, probably many of the claims, honestly. And I do think that with this congressional hearing happening this past week and some of the whistleblowers becoming more prominent in popular media, we probably are going to see a rise as well in some of these illegitimate claims of UFOs.
I think it's beautiful, Amber. I think the aliens gave us a visit, so we appreciate more the weird stuff we have at home. I think that's great and beautiful, and more people should go outside and look at the weird bugs and marvel at them. I think there's this hope that the aliens will be something like we see in the movies, and they'll be weird and interesting creatures, and also this assumption that they're going to be terribly violent and we should be worried about them. And I think that kind of sentiment that they're going to be super weird, very different from us, and want to fight with us is the kind of sentiment that grows this fear that then leads to not a healthy skepticism, but an overwhelming desire to deny that there's any potential of aliens out there and that David Grusch must be crazy or that we shouldn't waste our time with this kind of hearing and the Pentagon probably has nothing, or this kind of I'll believe it when I see it mentality. I think there's a lot of that fear that then leads to this denial. And instead of having this healthy skepticism and curiosity even about potential extraterrestrial life, instead we just have, dismissal and denial. It's not good. It's not healthy. I think the people of the United States want to know what the government knows, and to just assume there's nothing there and to know that there's so much being hidden, I think puts the general public in a worse position when it comes to trusting their government and now trusting journalists too.
Yeah, there's definitely a reason why trust in American institutions is at an all-time low. And also what I hear you saying there, Jessica, is that the aliens are indeed telling us to touch grass. We'll be back with more Rising after this.